Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Reading Through the Bible. My name is Carl, and today we're going through Matthew 27. I checked my microphone and everything beforehand, so we're good to go until we run into the next issue that I gotta look for before I start streaming. We've gone through the actual OBS client before where chat wasn't showing up, and I had to figure out those docs and how to do that, and you know, get a bunch of updates and stuff like that. So that is added to the list of things I do before I go live, and it's good. It keeps me prepared, or having to be prepared, which I think is important. And just kind of add it to the list of things that I do in the morning when I wake up, and go through and make sure that I'm ready to go once that clock hits 10. Today going well, going pretty well so far, I should say. Woke up just before 7 today, so I'm getting back to, the regular schedule, and had some kitties come visit me and kept me lying in bed for a little bit because they wanted to be on top of me and lie on my arms and stuff like that. But, just a couple minutes there, and got out of bed and, kind of went through my morning routine of just waking up and having some water and reading my Bible. And then I went for a walk. And haven't lifted yet. I did drink some water. I feel a lot better now, so definitely going to do that after this. But as of right now, things are good. Another beautiful day. Some painted white clouds in the sky, and just enjoying everything. My family comes home tonight, and so I'm really, really excited about that. Got to meet them at the airport later, and bring them home. And that should be good. And we'll just pick up where we left off, hopefully. So I want to talk about yesterday. There was a really, really good question in chat. And I added, this stuff to the VOD afterwards. So if you want to go look at Matthew 26 on YouTube, you can see where I've added some commentary, an answer to the question, and some sources. But I wanted to touch on it here, and I think it's really important enough that I'll probably do just like a special episode on this. And the question was about the timeline of Jesus's crucifixion and resurrection. And it was I don't know if the person was someone who was trying to hit me with a gotcha question, or if they're a Christian who was kind of there to test my knowledge. But either way, it worked. Definitely went and did some research. It's not something that I had ever really thought about. I just kind of took for granted. But completely right. If Jesus was crucified on Friday and resurrected on Easter, that is not 3 days and 3 nights in the tomb, and that would disprove his claim, because that really is the only sign that he said he would give the people of his time, or the teachers of the law that we read through, right? So we've read through pretty much all of Matthew, or we have up until this point. And multiple times he told the teachers of the law who asked for a sign, he's like, you won't get any sign except for Jonah, right? 3 days in the belly of the beast, so will the Son of Man be in the earth, right? And so it's very important that this claim is verified. So instead, if he wasn't crucified on Friday and raised on Sunday, then what happened instead? Well, like I said, I want to do, kind of a special episode on this and really go more in depth here. But I kind of put together a visual aid for you guys, which I do sometimes here, and just talk about this very briefly. You can see here in the supported with verses from the Bible and stuff and everything. So I just want to make sure that, we go through this. Basically, Jesus was crucified on Wednesday and was raised Saturday evening. So here's the timeline, and apologies for, the wall of text and everything. I'm not, a big creative guy with a bunch of images and stuff like that. But maybe when my wife gets home, I can have her, make this in something easier to read and look through. But basically, here's the timeline. Tuesday evening, after sunset, Jesus and his disciples kept the Passover. Afterward, they went to the garden, and Jesus was captured. All right, we read through that. They went to the garden where Jesus prayed. Jesus was taken prisoner by a band of men. We went through that last night, right? The next morning, and this is all stuff we're going to read today, so it's fittingly perfect timing, actually. Wednesday morning, the next morning, he was brought before Pilate and sentenced to death, right? Because that night, Tuesday night, after he was captured, they took him before the Sanhedrin. They had a false trial, etc. They went, took him before Pilate the very next morning. He was crucified at 9 a.m. Wednesday afternoon. I don't need to scroll this. Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m., Jesus died. Joseph took the body, or asked for the body from Pilate. Almost near sunset, he had to hurry, not embalming, but putting him in the tomb. And then Wednesday evening, he was buried, right? Thursday was a high day. So this is the big thing here that I've learned, is that there were 2 Sabbaths that week. And so the Bible says he was crucified before the Sabbath. And most people think, oh, the Sabbath is Saturday. And so he was crucified Friday. But that is incorrect. That year, Passover fell on a Wednesday, I believe. And so he was crucified on the Thursday. He was crucified on Wednesday, but the Sabbath was the Thursday. And so that was the day that they rested. His body was in the tomb. They didn't do anything. That was the day of unleavened bread. They ceased from work. Friday was a day where the shops all opened again. And so that's when the women went and bought spices, ointment, etc., to embalm Jesus. And they prepared everything. And then Saturday was the weekly Sabbath, whereas Thursday was an annual Sabbath. So very interesting how things fell that year. I guess it was AD 31. And so let's see. Here I believe it was Wednesday, April 25th that year. So we have the sources now that we can go back and look up and see that was true. Basically, as I said, Saturday they rested. Sunday morning near sunrise. Oh, he was resurrected on Saturday evening, by the way. And then Sunday morning, I'll have to add that. Sunday morning, the ladies came to the tomb. They saw the guard. Jesus was already risen. So very interesting stuff, and excellent question. I am very happy that was asked, and just wanted to share that with you guys, because that's, the reason we're doing this, for me to learn as well. And like I said, iron sharpens iron. I have to get in better, what's the word? Just have to get better at checking chat. I do have it up here, but for some reason I was doing something and didn't see it till it was too late. I think it was about 20 to 30 minutes after the person asked the question when I finally looked at it and read it. So I'll work on that too, but hey, I'm glad for the question, and I was able to address it now, and then here you go. So that was just a little explanation here, and we'll go and talk about Matthew 27 now. Judas hangs himself. Yeah, we're getting into the real nitty-gritty here. So let me pray first, and then we'll go through it. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for today, Lord, for this chance to read through your word and how your Son came to die on the cross for our sins. Lord, we are so grateful for that, and we just ask that you open our hearts and minds to him and what he did for us, and to accept that, Lord, and to have it reach every single part of our life. Lord, use the Holy Spirit to speak through me. In Jesus' righteous holy name, amen. Okay, so Judas hangs himself. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people made their plans how to have Jesus executed. So they bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. When Judas, who betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. I have sinned, he said, for I have betrayed innocent blood. What is that to us? They replied. That's your responsibility. So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. The chief priests picked up the coins and said, it is against the law to put this into the treasury, since it is blood money. So they decided to use the money to buy the potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. That is why it has been called the field of blood to this day. Then what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. They took the 30 pieces of silver, the price set on him by the people of Israel, and they used them to buy the potter's field. The Lord commanded me. Jesus before Pilate. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? You have said so, Jesus replies. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. Now it was the governor's custom at the festival to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd. At that time, they had a well-known prisoner whose name was Jesus Barabbas. So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah?" For he knew it was out of self-interest that they had handed Jesus over to him. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message: "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. "Which of the two of you do you want me to release to you?" asked the governor. "Barabbas," they answered. "What shall I do then with Jesus who is called the Messiah?" Pilate asked. They all answered, "Crucify him." "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." All the people answered, "His blood is on us and on our children." Then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. The soldiers mocked Jesus. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. The crucifixion of Jesus. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall, but after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots, and sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed a written charge against him: "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him, for he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. The death of Jesus. From noon until 3 in the afternoon darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah." Immediately one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine and vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Many women were there watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, the mother of Zebedee's sons. The burial of Jesus. As evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Jesus took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb. The guard at the tomb. The next day, the one after Preparation Day, chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. Sir, they said, remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days I will rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. This last deception will be worse than the first. Take a guard, Pilate answered. Go make the tomb as secure as you know how. So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting the guard. That is the word of the Lord. Praise be to God. Wow. A lot of crazy stuff in this one, right? Especially after what, we kind of talked about at the beginning. So yeah, first of all, Judas hangs himself, which seems a little strange after what he had already done. We already know he's a man of the money. But I guess he had some remorse, decided, he'd flip things, and then wants to take it back, which unfortunately it's too late to do. So they're like, well, that's on you. Great things for the chief priests and the elders of the temple to do. Imagine if that was the Pope and, Catholic elders and stuff like that. It's crazy. So Judas, he goes away, and his initial reaction is to hang himself. He doesn't realize that Jesus can forgive sins. Been in the company of Jesus for however many weeks, and still just doesn't get it. Just for whatever reason, just decides to end it. He thinks it's all over, and it's unfortunate, but fulfills scripture here. The chief priests, they pick up the coins. They're like, it's against the law to put this in the treasury since it's blood money. Absolutely crazy that all this happened, especially by these people, the righteous people, the ones who are, in charge of the temple and all that. So they use the money to buy the potter's field, the burial place for foreigners. Yep, and that fulfills Jeremiah the prophet. Okay, this is Zechariah and Jeremiah. Okay, so Jesus before Pilate. This is an interesting one. I saw I guess it was a sermon, talking about how Jesus went about answering questions and when he was just in front of the governors and stuff, and during his trial. This is probably one of the most, famous stories in the history of the world. It's also been, portrayed in movies and things like that, like The Passion of the Christ and stuff. So I think we all have, or at least most of us have, a pretty clear understanding or idea of what happened there. But it's really interesting, as Matthew doesn't give a whole lot of in-depth speech from the trial. There's just one question, and then it just kind of goes through, right? He's getting the events, but not necessarily the details. Luke is more of the details guy, and we'll get there. But the idea is that all his answers and the way he acts and everything he does shows who he believes is in charge. And the sermon was basically talking about how we react, and when we get into issues with our spouse or our girlfriends or whoever it may be, coaches, teachers, other coworkers, how we react shows who we think is in charge, right? And a lot of times we think, oh, it's this person's in charge or I'm in charge. A lot of times, especially as Americans, we're like, I'm in charge of my own life. And I work hard and I get the fruits of that labor, and, that's how it's supposed to be, etc. But when things feel out of control, all of a sudden we tend to, kind of lose control of ourselves. And Jesus didn't act that way at all. He acted as if his Father was in charge, that God was in charge the entire time. And he's right. And it's very interesting because we'll read about it, I think, more in Luke, where he goes through more of Jesus's conversation with Pilate. But Pilate starts the conversation very full of himself, very prideful, right? He's like, I have the power to release you. And Jesus is like, no. He's like, you don't have any power except for what was given to you from above. And over the course of this short conversation, with a guy, Jesus, who isn't really very forthcoming with a lot of information, Pilate starts to realize that he maybe isn't all that in charge. And it's a fascinating thing to see, you know, his reaction as well when he realizes that maybe Jesus isn't, just a man. And then, he starts to try to release him, but still can't because guess what? He's not as in charge as he thought he was. So really fascinating stuff. Here, like we said, Jesus says, "You have said so," which is, how he goes through a lot of things and saying like, whatever you say, that's not the truth, but okay. And then, he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, same guys who sold him out for blood money, right? And Judas. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they're bringing against you?" Jesus doesn't say a thing, right? Who does that? Normally, especially if you're thinking that Jesus is the militaristic leader who's going to come through, why would he be someone who doesn't talk about anything, right? It would be all built on that and pomp and, confidence and physical violence and being in charge, and stronger than somebody else. So, Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge. Now, as a governor's custom at the festival, right? And it's Jesus Barabbas. I always find it interesting that other people in the Bible are named Jesus. And I know it's, a semi-common name, especially like in Mexico or Spanish cultures, Jesus. But, there's only one Jesus Christ. And so reading these other ones, it's like, whoa, there are other Jesus out there. Jesus Barabbas, who was a murderer, actually, that's why he was in there, led an uprising and stuff like that. But the people still wanted him as opposed to Jesus Christ. So Pilate knows this. His wife tells him, "Don't have anything to do with that man." But he can't do anything, right? He's at the mercy of the crowd. And you have to think from Pilate's point of view as well. He's appointed there as the governor to keep peace in Jerusalem. And that was probably a pretty decently high level in the Roman army. Jerusalem, major city, is the capital of a country. And so he's there and really thinking about his own job and himself and trying to make sure that, they don't depose him because he can't keep the peace. Right. So he's making sure, he's like, oh, this is starting to get out of hand. Okay, maybe I just give in to the mob instead of actually doing what he may have known was right. And the Bible seems to indicate that he did know. So very interesting. He asked, okay, I'll give you Barabbas. What do you want me to do with Jesus? And they're all like, crucify him. He's like, why? What crime has he committed? But they just shout louder, crucify him. Mob mentality. It's a crazy thing. It happens these days as well, right? Like we get into mobs, we get into groups of people, and all of a sudden it's just, you feel the energy and you lose your mind. Very fascinating way that people work. And you got to be careful when you're around mobs or at big gatherings, things like that, protests. Very easy to let that get out of control. And we have to, try to have some kind of intellectual thinking going on as opposed to just run with whatever the flow of energy is. And so Pilate washes his hands. I'm innocent of this man's blood. It's your responsibility. And, that doesn't really do anything. It's like, okay, you take him and do what you want with him. But, I could set him free if I wanted. So it's kind of a cop out. People answer, his blood is on us and our children. Yeah, it definitely is. And then he released Barabbas over them, but he had Jesus flogged and hand him over to be crucified. This flogging in those days was absolutely brutal. And I think we may have a general, if you've seen the movie, Passion of the Christ, or if you've seen any of the other movies depicting this, or just any of the contemporary things of the time, you'll see, basically it was a whip made with bits of metal and bits of bone and stuff attached to it. So it would really just lock in to your skin and just rip it clean off. And they give you a lot of these whippings. So Jesus went through intense physical pain, was basically bleeding out as he was walking to the cross. walking with the cross on him, because they made him carry his own cross up there, and he collapsed. He couldn't do it anymore, and so that's why Simon was recruited to carry the cross. Just absolutely brutal to think about, what he went through for us. And if that doesn't really stir your heart, then you got to think about that and why it's not. Not only, it's crazy that not only physically went through this, but we don't talk about the 6-inch nails in his hands and in his feet, and him being up there and struggling with his full body weight every breath. But for him, the worst part of it was when God turned his back on him, which is crazy to think about. We're, and I think, rightly so, we're all scared of death. We're all scared of physical pain. But we never think about spiritual pain. We never think about the brokenness of things and what it's like to be without God. And that is the definition of hell, to be apart from God. And Jesus, felt that for just a short period of time, but during his suffering, that was the worst part of it. So definitely something to think about in the future, and maybe make a change in your own life if you're feeling that, that's something that changes your mind. Soldiers mock Jesus. Yeah, these Roman soldiers take him in, famous. They put a crown of thorns on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. They knelt in front of him and mocked him, "Hail, King of the Jews." This is, think about how you'd feel if this was happening, but you had the power to stop it, right? Imagine that, where like you are literally a Super Saiyan, to put it in like anime terms. And you could just do whatever you wanted, to these people. And yet you come and you serve and you bow down and you allow them to do this in order to save them. These very people who are mocking him, that's who he died for. He died for, the prostitutes, the tax collectors, the people who are living life every day in sin. And that's incredible. If you think about like who would you die for in your life? I know that, I would like to say I'd die for my wife and son, possibly my parents. It's hard to say when, push comes to shove, but Jesus literally went through all of this, the most brutal type of death, in order to be a sacrifice for us. Just absolutely wild. So they call him the King of the Jews. They spit on him. They mock him. They take off the robe, put his own clothes back on. They lead him away to crucify him. Like we said, Jesus collapsed. He couldn't carry his cross anymore, so they named Simon, or they recruited Simon to carry the cross for him. They went to Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Probably pretty fitting. They gave him wine mixed with gall. I'm not quite sure what gall is. I used to know. I think it's a kind of mixture of vinegar and some just nasty stuff, right? You don't want that. So Jesus tasted it and he's like, no more. And then they just sat down and they kept watch over him. Maybe to see if, God would send angels to bring him down or anything like that. And then they put this Jesus, the King of the Jews, above him. Typically they would do stuff like that so that anybody passing by would be deterred from doing anything bad. I mean, these were definitely public executions in order to stop people from, doing things. And I'm sure it was, usually pretty successful. Obviously there were a couple other rebels who were crucified with him. But you would think generally that if you've witnessed something like this and you see the state of Jesus' body on the cross and, nails through his hands and feet, you're like, yeah, I think I'm good. I'm not going to go out that way. So, yeah. Then his own people come by and they yell things at him, mock him. Same way as the chief priests and the teachers of the law. Say he saved others, but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. Would they? I don't know. It's hard to say. Some might, but others would say, oh, we need to see it to believe it. There's always stuff with miracles where you explain it away. And it's really about the heart, the state of the heart, whether or not you're going to believe in that. Seen Jesus work many, many miracles, and a lot of people believe, but a lot of people didn't either. Or a lot of people saw all the miracles, like Judas, and still betrayed him. Pretty wild. So there's no guarantee that any of this, would have changed anything for them. And it would have defeated the purpose anyway of him being the living sacrifice for us. So he trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him, for he said, I am the Son of God. And the rebels next to him. There's actually, little different story that they started that way, but one of the rebels actually asked him to be in his kingdom with Jesus, and Jesus said, yeah, you'll be in my kingdom with me today. That's in one of the later Gospels. Not sure which one. We'll have to read through and find out. The death of Jesus. So, you got to think that witnessing this, right, was enough of a miracle where people would be like, oh, surely he was the king of, the Son of God. Right. Noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some people think he's calling Elijah. They get him the wine and vinegar, and they're like, yeah, don't you want it now? And he's like, no. And then they're like, okay, let's just see what happens. And Jesus cried out in a loud voice and gave up his spirit. And there we go. The curtain of the temple was torn in two. The earth shook. The rock split. The tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died had raised to life. So we got tons of resurrections there. So definitely not out of the, ordinary. Well, I should say out of the ordinary, just out of the realm of possibilities. And they came out of the tombs of Jesus and went into the city and appeared to many people. And now the ironic thing is the centurion and those who were with him said, surely he was a son of God. This isn't the Jews who are sitting there, watching him. They don't believe because of this, but the Romans believe, the Gentiles believe because of this, which is crazy. Prophets just have no honor in their hometown. They say, oh, Jesus is a Jew. He's not the Messiah, blah, blah, blah. And he's reaching the people who just mocked him and just hung him on a cross. Just through this. It's absolutely wild. Many women were there watching from a distance, among them Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, which is Jesus' mother, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. If you remember back a couple chapter, the two sons of Zebedee asked Jesus, can we sit at your right and your left hand? And they were mama's boys. All the other disciples were like, what are you guys doing? You can't say that. The burial of Jesus, Joseph of Arimathea, a rich man who actually had his own tomb, gave it to Jesus instead. He went to Pilate. He asked for Jesus' body. It had to be a rushed, kind of hurried burial because the next day was the Sabbath on Thursday. And so, they took down his body, and right before sunset, made sure that the body was buried, the tomb was closed. And then that's, how the Pharisees came and asked Pilate for a guard as well. And then here, we have the next day, the one after preparation day. And so we know this is, preparation day was that day, was the Friday. So they went on the Sabbath and said, hey, we said after 3 days, I'll rise again, give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the third day, right? It wasn't the third day yet, but it was the preparation day. So there had to be 2 Sabbaths that week. This last deception will be worse than the first, right? Take a guard, go make the tomb as secure as you know how. So they posted a guard. There's no way that, this guy gets out or that anybody gets in without them knowing. And there you go. That's the end of Matthew 27. Obviously a nice little cliffhanger for us for Matthew 28 tomorrow. But that's the way it goes. It's good stuff. So I hope that you guys enjoyed today's walkthrough and also going through the timeline of Jesus' actual crucifixion to resurrection. Um, Something that I learned, and definitely excited about that. Now I'm examining everything through a new light because, the American church either doesn't touch on it or teaches it incorrectly, which is actually denying the only claim that Jesus made that can be proved that he's the Son of God. And so if you're going to church and your pastor's telling you he was crucified on Friday and raised on Sunday, that's not true. And it in invalidates, there we go, invalidates the fact that Jesus said he would be in the earth 3 days and 3 nights. And that wasn't a figurative thing. He used Jonah, right? Some people say, oh, he used the Greek figurative way where it's just like any part of 3 days and 3 nights. No, he used the Hebrew way, which was Jonah, who was a Jew. And he said, I will be in the earth 3 days and 3 nights, just like Jonah. Very literal. And he was, right? He was crucified on Wednesday and raised on Saturday evening, a full 3 days and a full 3 nights. So very important. I feel like I was commissioned to bring truth to the church and to make sure things are truthful. And I think that's a big deal. I think it's really important that your church teaches this properly, and because everything hangs on that. The fact that Christ is resurrected. First and foremost, that he was resurrected, right? If he wasn't resurrected, then everything we believe is just a waste of time, and we're just fools, right? Paul says that himself, and we'll read through that later. But also, if he wasn't resurrected on the timeline that he stated he would be, it's also just a waste of time, right? There's a lot of, things that you have to put credence into what Jesus said, because he can't be just like a good man or a good teacher because of the things he said. I am the Son of God. He's either insane or he's like a devil, basically, if he's not the Son of God. But if he is the Son of God and it's true, then you have to give him credit. He is the Son of God, right? And so very important, not only that the resurrection is taught properly, but that the timeline is taught properly as well. And I would be willing to believe that a lot of people haven't looked into this, because I never did. Like I said, it's just something I took for granted. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense, I guess, kind of. But then you count it out and you're like, no, that's not actually how it was. And this is the doing of Satan, who's been, sowing discord and lies for the last however many years on earth. Forever, actually, ever since he was cast down from heaven. So hopefully you guys learned like I did, and now you have something you can talk to your pastor about, and hopefully he agrees and understands and does some research into it himself. And I'm definitely going to do that with my pastor and just bring it up and, see where it leads. So thank you so much for joining me, guys. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, if you're watching on the VOD, then you can leave a comment or a question or something. And just so grateful for the question in chat yesterday that kind of led me on this, and really has helped me grow in my faith. And so hopefully my discoveries have also helped you grow in yours. And I look forward to reading Matthew 28 with you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And this has been another episode of Reading Through the Bible. My name is Carl. See you guys 10 a.m. Central tomorrow morning.